From my perspective, it has a lot to do with the particular focus that I'm in our career in cell therapy, cell and gene therapy. And for that matter, there's a lot. It's quite aggressive changing times for the field from the early days to everything is manual to automation, as well as the influence in more analytical tools than ever existed before to better our product. So that's requiring the need for a great deal of flexibility and a little bit different focus for CDMOs than the traditional biologics and small molecule side of the industry. And something that I think's really evolved for me, having worked in this aspect with CDMOs, is that the traditional model of working with the senior, you've got a master cell agreement, then you get this the scope of work agreements. But the field is aggressively changing so much that being able to continuously align the SOW with the movement in the field is something that I've found CDMOs need to provide a little bit more flexibility to make it a much more fluid and cost-effective process. So that's a bit more of my focus for this conversation.
Very good. And Donna, I tell you what, it's your last comment there was right on the mark for our first question, one of our first questions that has just come in. I'll read that to you, and then it has to do with exactly what you just said. With the push towards flexibility, specifically with contracts, SOWs, etc., how do you maintain consistency between client projects, or even with the same client who has change orders? So it's how do you, I think the question really is how do you balance that? I mean, you can't be you can't be so flexible. You're all over the place when you're coming to working with a individual client or with a number of clients. So this is a good place to just introduce the other side to flexibility, and that's some consistency and some ability to understand how to move forward with projects. So maybe some thoughts, follow up on what you just said based on that question from someone in the audience.
Sure. From my perspective, I think the intent and purpose, obviously, MSAs are pretty cookie cutter for all that matter. But when you get down to the actual scope of works and to develop an intended format with that scope of work covering all the critical areas that are typical, but understanding that that's the intended structure. But I have seen the scenario where you go in your 10, 14 change orders from the original SOW, and it's even from a financial and management perspective as an officer of a company, it gets quite tedious. One of the thoughts that I've had and that I'm currently in the process of trying to work with a CDMO is to make it essentially like we do with all our clinical trials and our protocols, that we develop a bridging document that says, this is what it said in the SOW, here's what we're migrating to. And then that becomes a tool to understand where you were, that you started with, and where you're ending up today, and be able to track those changes and those deliverables much more effectively. And I think it also plays a role in effectively designing, especially change orders, that they align, that you show the deviation from the original SOWs and build it in a more of a task and deliverable format that tends to different CDMOs. The change orders tend to be more generic and it's just focused on a point and doesn't really tie back to original SOWs and the difference in deliverables expected to go forward. So I think it's just something that those of us, especially in a field that's rapid and improving product and our push to automation and commercialization, that we need to be very conscientious of.